Spinal Cord Injury Manitoba has been around for 75 years, but it wasn't until 1935 that a German doctor who discovered sulfa drugs and later the development of antibiotics that really opened the door for people with spinal cord injuries to have actually a life expectancy that was more than a year long. Because up until the Second World War, people with spinal cord injuries just didn't survive. We had this massive group of paralyzed veterans who came back from the European battlefields to a society in Canada that really wasn't built for disability.
When they came back, they were a new breed, and people weren't used to dealing with people with that degree or level of impairment. They didn't have any book to read about how to do it, and they had to work it out by themselves.
There were a whole bunch of issues. There were housing issues, there were employment issues. Soldiers coming back to Canada injured really didn't have anything to help them.
What they ended up doing was rehabilitating themselves and then setting up an organization that would help support them. The whole thing just came together naturally.
The first specialized spinal cord injury rehab hospital in Canada was in Toronto, Lyndhurst Lodge, and that was started by John Council, who was one of the paralyzed veterans who came back from the war in 1942.
The rehab hospital was an old mansion converted for these war vet guys.
All of these veterans ended up in these military hospitals, including Deer Lodge Hospital in Winnipeg.
So they would be sitting in hospitals, twiddling their thumbs and trying to remain healthy. So they basically set up an association and they set about to solve some of the problems that they faced. So the organization from the start was very rooted in what its members needed.
It all started back in the 1940s with that initial group of paralyzed veterans who joined forces with their brothers and sisters in other provinces to make those changes happen. So from 1945 onwards, there was a lot of activity happening for people who were living with spinal cord injuries. The individual who really led that effort was Tony Mann. He was the executive director for Spinal Cord Injury Manitoba for the first 30 years. So from 1946 to 1976, Tony Mann was the face of Spinal Cord Injury Manitoba.
He was huge in that he basically created the Canadian Paraplegic Association in Manitoba.
I was immediately impressed with the passion with which he spoke about the mission of the agency. He really was the first person who made me see a very productive, passionate, intelligent man with fairly severe disabilities.
He had a vision of this organization that was going to be there to help people with spinal cord injuries.
He was a lovely man. Everybody deferred to him.
Tony was one of the finest men I've known. He was an ordinary guy, but he was totally honest, reliable, and genuine. He certainly commanded respect, and in a room, he was the one that people turned to.
And had a major role to play in the establishment of the Manitoba Wheelchair Sports Association. Penn Sinclair, the spinal cord unit at the Health Sciences Center. Perhaps most important of all, barrier-free design in the Manitoba Building Code. Today, all of that is as a result of the advocacy of people like Tony Mann.
Within a few years after the war, because there were no more paralyzed veterans coming back from Europe, the sustainability of these specialized rehab centers was threatened. The Canadian Paraplegic Association became creative and started looking at admitting civilians into those hospitals. And of course, in the 1950s with the polio epidemic, we started to see a lot more civilians who were needing access to specialized rehab services.
The organization responded just naturally and organically to another group of paralyzed people.
Polio affected a broad population. For example, Art Braid, who is a keystone person in this association, was a polio victim.
Art was an outstanding historian, legal expert. He was passionate about our organization and our members.
Art had an unusual ability to relate to the high-up political figures in the community or the average particular Joe.
Art could be quite fierce.
He was a dynamic individual.
When Art was prepared to speak to the powers that be about something, they listened to him.
Art served at both the national and provincial levels for many years.
He was also very much respected by peers across the country and was very important in developing the national structure of CPA, where the provincial bodies have autonomy and yet they're part of this organization.
It was a pleasure to be from Manitoba and be part of that.
He was a driving force, along with Tony Mann and the rest of them at the beginning there.
When I think of people that left a lasting impression, I think the first person that comes to mind is actually Arnie Shrivers.
Arnie taught me a whole lot about spinal cord injury.
He was a very key person.
Some of the major influencers in programming were John and Glenn and Harriet and Shelley.
And John Lane.
I thought John Lane was just a super leader and CEO for the division. He was intelligent, he was genuine.
And of course, Dr. Dubois.
Dr. Dubois was a very humble guy that saw the value of the association.
Individuals like Alan Simpson and George Dick and many others.
There are 3 or 4 people who should be on the CPA Manitoba Mount Rushmore, I guess.
There's been many major activities and successes in the years that I've been here. One of the most important, I think, was the development of a robust electronic case management system. This system tracks our service demand. It provides evidence of our accountability to our funders.
And it was outstanding, and it just changed our lives. I loved it. It was adopted nationally.
We worked out a project to set up a symposium for disabled farmers. There were farmers that came from Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, even a couple of Americans. So that was a very important initiative that we were proud to be part of.
Another exciting program that was offered and facilitated by SCI at a national level was an international training program.
We developed a system of rehab plans that were goal-oriented and helped us to identify what the major issues of our clients were.
Certainly the service level has always been excellent, and I have been able to observe that from a number of perspectives.
The Spinal Cord Injury Unit program was the envy across Canada. Whatever was going to work for the client, that's what we were after.
The thing that was really impressed on me early on was the real power and the value of peer support.
CPA is unique in our service delivery model, members helping members through peer support. We are not a medical model, but a community-based holistic rehabilitation model.
I think peer counseling is invaluable, and I think it's what set CPA apart.
All the other organizations are either advocacy and nothing else, or service and nothing else. But CPA is all of those things.
Because I had a high-level spinal cord injury myself, I think it was more believable.
You also need a core that actually understands in their gut from their lived experience what's going on.
Meeting those individuals and seeing by their example that it was possible to live a full life.
You feel like you're part of a family that takes care of its own members.
It's just so much more effective. Living with that on a day-to-day basis, having gone through the readjustment in your self-image that comes from an injury like this, some of it can't be taught.
What is it that's so special about them? And what's special about them is, first of all, they've got kind of an instant rapport, and they have this practical knowledge that an able-bodied rehab counselor just doesn't have.
I think they can also play a mentorship role as well as a leadership role for clients and for the organization.
So they are a role model, but they're also just a fountain of information.
And that's what I try to instill in them, a sense of hope that all was not lost. Not putting their hopes so high they couldn't reach them, but giving them hope.
Clients feel like they're part of the organization, not only being served, but of useful service.
That's something that has been at the core of the organization from the very beginning with the war veterans.
This feature augments the services of the professional staff.
One of the other defining aspects of Spinal Cord Injury Manitoba is the professional model of service delivery. In addition to peer support, Manitoba has always held as a very important thing providing services through the lens of a professional rehab counselor.
Professional training provides basic education in rehabilitation knowledge, practice, and is a desired minimum standard for best practices in service delivery. Education provides a strong foundation in developing expertise in counseling, adhering to strict ethical practices and evidence-based knowledge.
The professionals brought something to the organization that was very necessary in that they brought in new ideas, perhaps new ways of doing things, new perspectives.
Spinal cord injury is a very complex problem. It affects all aspects of your life, and a professional has to have the training to be able to relate to a variety of counseling needs.
There's a professional dimension that we don't understand from a gut feel.
That combination was really beneficial in so many ways.
They can see with peer support that people are able to go on and live with a disability. And with professional rehab counseling, you get the support that you need for perhaps going back to school or learning a new trade or just exploring some other options in terms of a meaningful vocational life.
When you combine the two together in a team, you get the best of both.
It's really hard to conceive what the challenges may be down the road, but certainly we want to continue to do the great work that we're doing already.
I think there will always be a role for SCI Manitoba to play, advancing inclusion and full citizenship, removing barriers and driving towards equitable opportunities.
There's still pretty big gaps in services and opportunities for people with disabilities.
There's a lot of work to be done sort of socially still.
The issues will change and evolve, and the thing is, the organization needs to be able to respond to these issues from the perspective of its members.
I'm sure technology has already improved things tremendously.
Technological advances are amazing. Research into a number of innovative therapies, advancement in stem cell research. So I look for all of those things in the future. And I believe, as many others do, that with proper funding and continued research, that people who are doing those things will come up with a solution.
Thank you very much for your interest in Spinal Cord Injury Manitoba. Please consider making a donation to support the work that we're doing with people in Manitoba who are living with spinal cord injury so that they can adjust, adapt, and thrive. You can visit us online at our website, Spinal Cord Injury Manitoba, which is scimanitoba.ca, and you can also make donations online through canadahealth.org.